Hey folks, welcome back to Braai Brus with Byron Shepherd and Chris Wyatt. Byron in South Africa, and I, of course, am here in the U.S. And why are we not live yet over here on YouTube? Are they playing the usual games? I'm still. Oh, finally it loads. There, come on, there we go. All right, well, welcome back. I think it can be a little slow at times. And welcome back to the program, folks. Apologies for no bait and switch. There was no bait and switch going on here. I did have the news scheduled, but Byron and I were chatting this morning about something else, and I said, hey, did you want a live stream? And we worked it out. So we're doing a short live stream today, talk about things. We're just less than a week away from South Africa's elections, and so I thought we'd talk a little bit about that today and see how things are going. Byron, how's it going on your end of the world?
Well, as much as to be expected this close to an election, right? The ANC's getting desperate. It was going up, now it's going down. They're promising every single, thing that they could think of to try to keep hold of the electorate, and it's not really working. So, but to be honest, it's pretty much typical election season, really.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say, doing everything they can to get votes. So let's say they've mobilized government resources illegally on behalf of the ANC. They have, I saw just today, Stats South Africa came out with a very positive report to bolster the ANC about, service delivery, which is a fantasy. And then also I saw that they sent their dinosaurs, their troglodytes out, Thabo Mbeki and Baleta and others going out and having the audacity to say that, look, the ANC is doing the right things, just give us more time. They're really, and now the latest today is they're promising 2 years after you reelect them, they're going to come with a basic income grant.
The big.
Yep.
The big. So that's actually our video for tomorrow. So very interesting because obviously the ANC have signed into law now the NHI.
Yep.
No one wanted the NHI, but
nope.
Getting the NHI.
Yep.
And very interestingly, it's had a detrimental effect in the polling on the ANC. So what the ANC were finding is that they were actually increasing in popularity as the election was going on. And obviously the ANC were in full election mode. And what they've now done is, long story short, pissed off the middle class. So the middle class now appears that obviously the NHR was saying they didn't want, because they've obviously had to go through forms of upward mobility to go from the poor to the middle class, and now the ANC is determined to make them poor again. And lo and behold, that's not a winning electoral strategy. The ANC is finding around the hard way that when you fuck around, you find out.
Well, as communists think that handouts, making people serfs and wards of the state and carrying them with no personal responsibility, seem to think that's a ticket to success. They're discovering that the nouveau riche, the middle-class black South Africans, are like, what? Well, you want to do what? And I think you're spot on there. That daily tracking poll that the SRF has been putting out is kind of annoying, and all the media reports glowing about... Yeah,
Social Research Foundation.
Yeah, that's kind of annoying poll every day. They're doing that. Day-to-day polling like that is fickle. But the latest one today has them down from 45 to 41%. And I think you're spot on your analysis. It is people are pissed off who've made it or are aspiring to make it, who believe in a work ethic, who believe in contributing to society, who have no problem with having access to services in a private level. It's a lot of people. The ANC thinks they can just give stuff out because they don't know their electorate. They think everybody's a go-go, who was, beaten badly by apartheid, and that's their voting base. They are very badly mistaken.
Yeah, but that's understandable when you consider that the majority of the top brass of the ANC or dinosaurs that have probably been in and around since the days of apartheid. I mean, Ramaphosa was my age during apartheid when he was fighting against apartheid. So he's really not a young guy. In fact, none of them are young. Yeah, so the reality is most of them remember a time of life that's very different from the time of life that is now. But the reality is that their time has come and gone, and for them to still assume that the world is 1960s, 1970s is a mistake. Now, you see the ANC have obviously prided itself on the entire time it's been here of you've got affirmative action, you've got B, you've got all the tenderpreneurs, you've got all the government subsidies to try and improve the poor's life, to give them degrees of upward mobility, to first become middle class, and then to become, as the ANC describes it, as industrialists. Well, there's no point in me becoming an elite, if you will, an industrialist, an entrepreneur, a middle class person, if all the benefits that are always associated with middle class I can no longer have, such as private medical aid. Private medical aid is, to a lot of individuals, a sign of the middle class. If you say, I've got private medical, it's usually a status symbol. Now, why that becomes even more interesting is now they want to obviously progress it even further and adopt a big. But the idea behind the big, and if you quote the ANC, their words exactly, is that it's a form of wealth redistribution. Now that makes a lot of sense if you're the ANC and you're just redistributing Wati's wealth, right? Because apartheid and illegal gains and whatever. But the reality of the situation now is that the black middle class outnumber the white middle class like significantly, which means that the actual wealth that in reality that you're redistributing is actually the black middle class. But if I'm the black middle class that had to go from being poor to being middle class through forms of upward mobility, then all you're doing is you're making me poor again. Well, yeah. I'm not going to be thankful for that. I'm not going to go, well done, ANC. You made me middle class and then you made me poor. You did such a great job because you redistributed my wealth, even though my wealth isn't the wealth that you thought you were redistributing. So you then have to ask yourself, well, why have they done this? Well, the actual answer is very easy, like very easy.
Yeah, they're out of touch.
No, it's not even they're out of touch. One word and one word only, Kasatu. Kasatu wanted it. The ANC are trying to give it because Kasatu are also watching their own membership base shrink because nothing's growing. The unions aren't as powerful as they used to be because they're bullshit. A lot of people don't want to be involved in the unions because they cause a lot more troubles than they were.
Well, and they've also lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs in the last decade.
100%. And so what Kasatu want is they want to go to the Pua and say, look, we got you this thing, and we've now got kind of like a monopoly on the trade unions, and you should like us because look what we did for you. And the ANC want to give that to Kasatu because Kasatu is threatening to leave the alliance and, I don't know, wherever else it's going to go. So in typical fashion, Ramaphosa is giving it to Kasatu because Kasatu think it will get them or make them more relevant with the poor and the people and the working masses. And don't work that way. All you're actually doing is going to a bunch of people and trying to put a band-aid, like a little band-aid, on a shotgun shell bullet wound in your front chest, and you're going, this will stop the bleeding. And everybody else with the brain cells like, no, it won't. And not only will it not stop the bleeding, but anybody who you're trying to pretend that you're curing with a band-aid is not going to thank you for it. And lo and behold, the middle class aren't thanking them for it. So it's very nice to see the ANC's electoral fortunes like going down and down.
Well, you've actually confirmed what I said. They are out of touch. They really don't get what's actually happening, and that's what you just described. I didn't get a chance to describe it, but that's exactly my point. Look, quite frankly, the tripartite alliance is a fossil to begin with, and as you say, the Kasatu's fortunes are declining. So frankly, there should have been a different approach. But, the ANC just doesn't get it. They don't want to get it. And they think that what's worked forever is going to keep working. I mean, when he went to the Imbizo in Northern Cape, Ramaphosa, and they introduced him, they said, the president, you realize his last paycheck will be May 15th. It's up to you to ensure that the president gets a paycheck on June 15th as president. I'm like, are you high? You're giving food parcels to people to come out to attend your Imbizo in the Northern Cape because they have no hope, no money, no way to go anywhere. And then you're telling them that they need to be worried about the salary of a person worth $400 million US. How disconnected from reality are these people? Pretty disconnected.
Yeah, so Ramaphosa's actual net wealth is just under 5 billion rand, for those who doesn't know. And the reason that becomes really interesting is because if you look at it strategically, the wealth to redistribute that would have the most impact would probably be Ramaphosa's. And lo and behold, he's probably the wealth that's not going to get redistributed, right? Because he's the president. So it's the whole thing is dumb. It's just dumb. And Erica says in the comment section, she says her son has gone to Joburg for meetings with Discovery regarding the NHI. And as much as I hate to say it, Discovery is responsible for the NHI. And when Discovery went to the Minister of Health and said, I don't like this NHI thing, after it was all agreed and was going through Parliament and getting signed, they said, hang on, we've been engaging with you for 10 years and you've never raised any objections. Now, the reason for that is because Discovery owns nearly 50 to 60% of the medical aid market. 60%, they are the monopoly player. And what Discovery thought is as the monopoly, they could increase that from 60 to 100% if they could take this NHR fund and they could manage it and control it, and that would make Discovery like a mega corp. The problem is they didn't realize that they're fucking dealing with commies, and commie bastards aren't interested in negotiating with corporates. And then when they went through the whole thing, they said, no, sorry, Discovery, we're doing it through central government. And Discovery were like, hang on, that wasn't the agreement, and now we don't like it. And they're going, you like the whole thing, you just don't like it when we're managing it. Mm-hmm. That smells like racism to us, you know what it's like. And then now all of a sudden they're saying to Discovery, well, go do one. Now, the reality of the situation is what Discovery should have done at the outset is said, no, this thing stinks. It's not in the best interest of the country. Not, this thing stinks, but how do I make it like really good for Discovery? So as much as I hate to say it, Discovery deserves all of this. This is the same company that tried to force all of their employees to have the COVID vaccine during the scamdemic. This is the same company that was saying they wouldn't cover people for their medical aid if they didn't have the experimental treatment that nobody could foresee the consequences of. Discovery is not a good guy here. So to a large degree, we can't sit there going, oh, shame, poor Discovery. Discovery deserves to burn, and burn it will. And if you looked at their share prices following the announcement of NHR, burnt it did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're right. The Discovery sat back like fat cats because they thought they would be the sole provider of this under this scheme. And so they didn't say anything until it was too late. It's the same sort of thing when it comes to expropriation and compensation. When South Africans realize that expropriation with compensation is about property, not land, property, that they can take your retirement accounts, they can take your cars, your buckies, your jewelry, everything you own to silence you, and realize that this is a cudgel for the party that's in power, regardless of who it is, whether it's the DA or the ANC or whoever. When people wake up to that, it's going to be too late. And that's what's happened here with NHI. They've sat back and you know, the thing is, but we see this all the time, Byron, you know this, you're in business. Big corporations love legislation. They love regulatory regimes. They love control. Sarbanes-Oxley was not opposed by any major corporation in the U.S. because it put an undue burden on small businesses and medium-sized enterprises, costing them millions of dollars in accountants and accounting fees and lawyers and things. Now, these people have, you know, compliance departments with thousands of employees and spending hundreds of millions of dollars. They don't mind spending that money because it drives the competitors out of business. And that's what Discovery was happy. They would love to see everyone else leave because they own 60% of the market. As you said, they want 100%. And that's, look, I'm a capitalist, but you should never trust. You know, as Reagan said, trust but verify.
Yeah, but there's a difference between a capitalist and then obviously being an individual who's just been captured by corporatism. There is a huge difference between capitalism and corporatism because corporatism isn't interested in capitalism, which is let the markets decide. It's interested in let's dominate the market. It's artificial control over the market through a conglomerate. It's not capitalism because if you look at a lot of these institutions, I mean, the US is a great example of it, right? You guys even have a phrase for it, which is too big to fail. There should be no such thing as too big to fail. If it fails, it fails. The end. That's what markets are there. That's
what capital's about. Yep. Let the market decide. Let the capital flow where it's going to go if there's a demand for it to go there. But South Africa's economy has long been a system of oligarchs and monopolies. I mean, look at the retail sector, look at the fast food sector. All of those businesses, people think they go to the mall, they think they go to Canal Walk or they go to Menlyn and they're seeing dozens of businesses, but they're all owned by 3 or 4 holding companies. Fushini, Edkers, all these different things are owned by a small group of companies. And it's the same thing in the banking sector. You have a control of the banking sector by 5 major banks, FNB, Standard Bank, it's the entire, and the mining is the same way, although there's a bunch of mining companies but they're mostly owned by BE Enterprises now. But the entire South African economy is controlled.
They're also basically owned by the same companies.
Exactly.
Like if you look at it, it's like the US is a great example of it. I mean, this is why we use the phrase corporatism, and corporatism is important to understand because they will use the phrase of white monopoly capital, but there's no such thing. What there is actually, if you look, like the majority of corporates are owned, as much as I hate to say it, and I'm sounding like Jeremy Nell now, but the majority of them are owned by BlackRock, and that's a fact. So, if you look at it from that perspective, is BlackRock really white monopoly capital? No. It's an institution that manages hedge funds and a large amounts of capital spread across the globe in order to put it all together for
maximizing returns for shareholders.
Maximizing returns. Like there is no white, black, brown, whatever. But when you have that kind of economic might, it's very easy to browbeat everyone, because what you don't want to do is that as the overall investor is have your one company compete against the other and then kind of minimize your returns on that company and sink that company to the point where actually your investment's dead. Like you almost want to have some kind of degree of homogeneity between them to kind of make sure everything kind of runs at a level playing field so that you get a good return. So it's understandable why it happens in this fashion. I don't like it, but it's not capitalism, and it's important to remember that it's not capitalism. It's corporatism.
Exactly, 100%. So I just got a super chat for 10 euros. That's real cash, one of the two internationally traded global currencies, the dollar and the euro these days, from Lori Lettinen, who's in Finland. Lori said, what's in Byron's EDC kit while roaming the streets of South Africa? Greetings from United Europistan. What's an EDC kit? Emergency Deployment Kit? What is an EDC kit?
Everyday carry, mate. So I carry...
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I'll as they're paid, I'll show you. So I carry one of these. It's a Microtech. It's a switchblade. It's the John Wick knife, actually. My wife got it for me for Christmas because I like the John Wick films. And then I carry a Smith & Wesson shield because obviously I live in Retardistan. And then I wear a watch. My watch is a special edition Casio. I got the Commando one because I thought it would be cool. It's actually not that cool. The watch strap breaks all the time. So it was great. It was a great price. It's not a Rolex. Rolex is leaving South Africa, by the way.
Yeah, I reported on that.
And I drive a fraud. I drive a Raptor. So there you go. Hope your 10 euros was worth it. Thanks very much for the super chat.
Yeah, well, once YouTube takes their 30% and Uncle Sam takes his 48%, then I'll get what's left. But thank you for the super chat. Do appreciate it. That'll help put a tiny dent in my plane ticket, so that'll be helpful. Yeah, I see that Rishi Sunak dissing on America, holding snap elections on July 4th, America's Independence Day. Wow.
So there's a lot of speculation as to why Rishi's doing that, and the vast majority of it actually now has to do with his opinion polls, which are non-existent. And the other side of it obviously has to do with the fact that no one fucking likes him. Now, that in itself has a problem because the opinion polls and the fact that no one likes him means that there is murmurs in the backbenches of the Tory party that they may push forward a vote of no confidence in him because on the basis that with him as the electoral head, they are bound to have 0 seats in the next upcoming parliamentary elections. So it looks like what he's done is he's done a snap election, literally snap. They got like 8 weeks or something before it's going to happen, which I think is the minimum amount of time he's allowed to do it. And that does mean that they can't now do a vote of no confidence. So rather than him actually be, the prime minister that was never elected and then pushed out, he can just go out and let Labour take over as the dominant party.
Well, if the local elections are any indication, good Lord, it's going to be a bloodletting. I mean, the Tories lost They lost more seats than the Liberal Democrats now have more council seats in those councils than the Tories do. That's shocking development. They came up from far distant position. No, it's this guy I warned at the time. I mean, he's a shyster, man. He and his wife are worth a fortune, hide the money in the Channel Islands. Yep.
Yeah. Now, the other news was that apparently his fortune just paid out something like 200 something million in some kind of dividends or something. So a lot of people are also now speculating that because he's got this big payout and his wealth just jumped up by like 4 times, like maybe he just doesn't really want to be prime minister now. The reality of the situation is that England's in for a very tough time. And I don't just mean is England starving itself, but also because of its geopolitical situation, where it's sitting in Europe, specifically in proximity to Russia. And also now because the Biden administration appears determined to do something with Iran. And as you know, typically the Brits do follow the Americans into dumbass wars. And the problem now is because of mass immigration to the United Kingdom, war with Iran is not popular. So the reality is to actually be the prime minister there when you're navigating that kind of geopolitical issue is not going to be easy. And I don't think Rishi wants to do it, to be honest. So it's a poison chalice that he's handing on to Keir Starmer, and good luck to Keir, because Keir's a fucking moron. So what he'll do, I don't know.
Well, to be fair, we followed the Brits into dumbass wars first. World War I, World War II, and they didn't follow us into Korea or Vietnam. So that's the full story. You're just talking about recent dumbass wars.
We talk about recent dumbass wars.
Okay.
You know, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria.
Oh, no. They didn't follow us. We followed them. We were cowardly, hiding behind their kilts going into Libya. Yeah, Barry Obama didn't want to be seen leading that. We didn't lead that at all. That's part of the problem. Anyway, but yeah. No, it's Sunak this guy was a disaster. I mean, I saw that he's gone now. The clan from Inverness there. What's it? Youssef clan for the First Minister. Yeah, First Minister of Scotland's gone now too.
Youssef Hamza.
Yeah.
Because of his famous Scotland is full of white people.
Yeah.
That when he introduced the hate crimes bill, he was the most complained about guy, according to the hate crimes bill, because of his famous white speech, which he didn't quite think was going to go that way. Even though everybody told him it was going to go that way.
He's a moron. I mean, look, if you're going to whine that all the government ministers in Rwanda are white, you might have a point. But if you're going to whine about all the white members of government in Scotland are white, you may a little bit confused there, buddy.
But don't you know, Chris, diversity is our strength in the United Kingdom. Therefore, you know what you really need is some more diversity there, because then you'll just be stronger. I mean, that's exactly what they're finding out in London right now, which is exactly why Sunak doesn't actually want to stick around, because I think he would have stuck around had there not been an Israeli-Palestine conflict. And one of the things that the Israeli-Palestine conflict is showing, well, I should actually say 2 things have been shown. The first is, Jesus, there's a lot of fucking Muslims in London. Like, fuck, there's a lot.
Well, there's no English there. That's for damn sure. No English in London, Leicester, Manchester, Birmingham.
Yeah, but it's one thing to see it on the statistics, but when you actually see like 2 million people.
No, I've actually seen it, brother. I've been in Luton. If you walk through Luton, it's like being in Saudi Arabia.
Mate, I live in Bedford. That's literally Luton's my next door neighbor.
Right.
Okay, so like.
So you know what I'm talking about.
100%. So, but it's one thing to see the statistics, but when you see them all congregating on London, like 2 million of them, like you're like, shit, this is a lot of people. Like when you see it on the news, you're like, crap, this is a lot of people.
When you see 400 people invading the grounds of Westminster Abbey to do daily prayers, that really gets your attention.
And so that kind of thing is obviously one of the reasons. The other reason is I don't think he realized just how vocal people were going to get over the Palestinian things. I mean, in the past, as you know, whenever Israel's kind of been pushed to the side, everybody's like, well, obviously you support the, Israel, the Jews, World War II, like concentration camps, like, why wouldn't you do it? Like, of course they should have a place in the world. But now, because the 2 million that we just referenced, they're all like, we don't want that. And I think a lot of parliamentary MPs and a lot of people now in Parliament have all gone like, oh shit, this isn't the country we thought it was anymore. And I mean, you can see it because the number one debated item in Parliament in 2024 was Palestine, that famous, constituency in England. And you got to be honest. What is the biggest difficulty that Rishi Sunak's going to have? Oh yeah, he's a Hindu. Yeah, Hindus don't get on with Muslims.
Yeah, they get on real well with Muslims. Yeah, we know from Pakistan and Bangladesh and India. Yep.
Yeah, they get on famously. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't stick around either, man. Like, I'd also be like, let's just have this election and just piss off.
And be done with it. Yeah, I think you're right, though. I think they have to have 2 months, but I think it's ridiculous. I mean, in a parliamentary system, you ought to be forced to have a 90-day period when you call an election. I mean, 2 months is ridiculous. That's too short a period.
But what's it going to matter? I mean, all the opinion polls. Remember what we were
saying? I'm talking about this election. I'm just saying in general, it should be 90 days at a minimum. Yeah, that's one thing I don't like about parliamentary systems. The Italians have had like 87 governments since 1945. It's insane. It's been more stable the last 20 years, but it was in the 80s. My goodness. I get to go to bed and come back after a long weekend, and there's another Italian government. It was crazy. Hey, listen, there's a super chat here from Paulie. He's got 40 rand.
PA election result prediction.
Let me frame it. So it says Byron PA election result prediction. Okay, all right. So Byron, let's do it. Let's ask what is your prediction? You have, of course, famously interviewed Gabe McKenzie. You've been following the Patriotic Alliance. The media wants us all to believe that they're going to have huge numbers of turnout, particularly Western Cape. I'm inclined to say that 30,000 people showing up at Athlon Stadium doesn't mean 30,000 people showing up at the polls. What's your prediction for the Patriotic Alliance?
So there's a number of things in this, and this is one of the things that Ramon and I have been at pains to say even on our own show. So the last time we did a live stream on Retail Dunistan, we talked about this. But I think people forget that there are 3 different elections in South Africa. The elections are not singular. So we have what we call national elections, provincial elections, and then local elections. And I think people need to be very, very specific in their head what that really means, because from a national perspective, the guys who go to parliament, you may have a very different idea to who you want to have your local provincial, in other words, your state, so like Gauteng or Western Cape, Eastern Cape. And then that may be, again, very different from your local elections, in other words, the guys who run your municipality. So as an example, you may say that when it gets through to national elections, the only real choice is the DA or the ANC. Fair enough. You may say that when it gets through to provincial and somewhere like the Western Cape or the Northern Cape, your only real options are the ANC because they're just so dominant. But in places like the Western Cape, again, you could say the DA's dominance is there. But in your local elections, you often find that to a large degree, you have more flexibility. So you may find the PA is able to win a certain ward and the DA is able to win a certain ward and so forth and so forth. Now, why those distinctions are important is because we have to remind ourselves that the elections are a national election. And that national election has also another voting for your provincial election. So what you're now saying to me is, what is the electoral result? Well, I think in the Western Cape, the PA may get anywhere between 3 and 5%. Because there is a large amount of colours in the Western Cape that the message of Gator McKenzie does gel with. And he is making very good inroads into the Western Cape because of the amount of coloured communities there are. And his argument will be that the DA have underrepresented the coloured communities and not given enough focus to the coloured communities, and he will reverse that trend. So from a national perspective, from a provincial, he will probably get that. He may get 1% in Gauteng because there are areas in Gauteng where he does very well. He's probably going to get no real votes in KwaZulu-Natal, nothing really in the Eastern Cape, nothing in the Northern Cape. If he does, he'll get between 3 and 5% in the Western Cape. Maybe he'll get 1% in Gauteng, maybe 1 or 2%. Nationally, that's a lot harder to say because on a national level, it's unlikely he'll be above 1%. Because again, when it gets through to the national vote, people are generally a little bit, should we say, that they're more inclined to vote for the dominant parties just because they have this idea of they don't want a wasted vote.
Well, 100%, and that's in line with my expectations. If they do well anywhere, it will be in the Western Cape. That's where his efforts have been for the most part. You've not seen him in Eastern Cape. You've not seen him in the Northern Cape for the most part. Certainly not in Northwest and Mpumalanga, Limpopo. So virtually no presence there. They'll be well below 1% nationwide, I think. But again, what's the outcome of the Western Cape? A lot of people are talking about they'll help drive the DA below 50%. I think that remains to be seen. The referendum party is certainly hoping on that. But whatever the case is, there'll still be a DA either controlled or led Western Cape government at the end of this.
There will definitely be, and it may be, the current polls are showing the DA having anywhere, the current polls are showing that the DA will be anywhere between 48% and 52% if they do have to go into coalition, or with the Freedom Fund Plus, and they'll still govern that province. Now, there are senior individuals in the Western Cape that have this opinion that Gayton may have his 3 to 5% in the Western Cape. But they don't feel that will carry over onto 2020, 2028, 2029, whichever the next election is. So a lot of them seem to think that this will be a one-time deal. Other people are less certain. It's hard to say. Some people really kind of put Gayton's party down. But one of the things that I can say from Gayton's perspective is he canvasses his communities very hard. He is on the ground. He does speak to people. And if you ever spent any time with Gayton, he's very likable. And if you send him around your house and you get him to talk to you, you're probably going to vote for him because he is just a likable guy. Does that mean that the PA will be the best in government? Well, they haven't really had much of an opportunity to show that. What will they actually achieve? Very difficult to say. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. But what you asked is, what are they likely to get? I think it's going to be between 3 and 5% for the Western Cape, less than 1% nationally. It's just all the polls, all the data, all the statistics are showing that's exactly what it is. There's Paulie in the comment section that says, 50% in the Western Cape, but the polls just don't support that. So unfortunately, this appears to be what the numbers will be. Now, do not underestimate what that may still mean, though, because even at 1%, remember that's still a seat in Parliament. They're still going to Parliament. 3 to 5% in the Western Cape is still a sizable amount. It does mean a presence in the legislature. So that's not something to. It's not something to sniff at. Remember, the EFF arguably is the most dominant party in politics purely because they are the intolerant minority. And as the intolerant minority, they do go around shouting their mouth off a lot. And remember, don't forget that that's only 10% of the national vote. So if they're able to have that much of an influence at 10% of the national vote, then it's like, don't underestimate what Gayton could do with even small percentages.
No, 100%. And I think that's a pretty fair analysis of where we're at in that. The thing is that you're right. He definitely has hit the ground hard, but I've hit the ground hard and very personal people and had great responses, but they got to show up at the polls. And people's enthusiasm doesn't always turn out to be showing up at the polls. I mean, if the 3,000 people that I met and talked to, and 99% of whom genuinely said they would love to vote for me and we're going to go do it, if all of them had shown up, then I'd be going to the election this fall as a candidate for the party. But that's not what happened. Only a fraction of those people showed up at the polls on the day for whatever reason. So I do agree that the PA is going to do, and I would say that's well. I'd say that's pretty impressive. I mean, in 2019, they got 6,600 votes nationally. They are going to surpass that by a wide margin this time in the Western Cape alone. But we'll see how they do. And I agree that, say they take 5% of Western Cape, that's going to be a voice inside that provincial legislature. And they'll definitely be able to make some noise and get a lot of attention because the press is clustered there. Propaganda 24's headquarters is right there in Cape Town. So they'll definitely keep an eye on the PA and be talking about them every time they say something in the provincial legislature. But nationally, yeah, they'll have a seat, maybe 2 in the parliament, but that's about it. But, Al Jamaia has a seat, and we hear them rambling all the time in Joburg, even though they have no use
remember,
whatsoever.
that's less than 1% of the vote and only 2 seats. 2 seats in council. That's a 2. And that's mayor.
Yeah, they got the mayor for that. Yep. Yep.
Don't underestimate what they can do. Yep. And if Gayton got 5% nationally, That would be a fantastic result for him.
Oh, that would
mean,
that would be a very different outlook.
He would probably land up as deputy president then, because the ANC will need a coalition partner, and as part of the agreement then would probably be something like he would want to take the deputy position. So, yeah, you really can't underestimate any of this stuff. It's a very topsy-turvy election. I don't think South Africa's seen one like this, but if you watch Dawie Roos did a whole interview on the election. He says, to be honest, it's going to be a bumpy next 4 years, but the plus side is that it's very difficult now, regardless of who's in the driver's seat, to actually destroy South Africa completely. It's very difficult for people to, according to him, adopt some really dumbass policies, because it's going to be difficult to get things now through Parliament without a clear majority. And if you look at fair areas of like Limpopo at the moment, where the EFF and the ANC are literally shooting each other, then
with guns,
with guns, like literally shooting each other
and shading children.
And so it's very. You forget that when you get these guys into, Ekurhuleni, and you say, just like try to get along. Okay, that's one thing. But when it's national governance, that's a completely different kettle of fish. The stresses are different. The logistics of running it is completely different. And what you need to be able to get anything done is very different to just a local municipality, even if it's, Durban or Joburg or Pretoria. Like, even if it's the big boys, it's still a different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
And to just flippantly say, well, that means that you're going to have the EFF and the ANC. Like, even if you did, it'd be very difficult for those guys to pass an agenda. It's not as straightforward as you think.
Well, you mentioned Dawie Roos, but all of my analytical videos have pretty much been ending with the same line. Buckle up, South Africa. It's going to be a bumpy ride for the next 5 years. And that's what I've been saying all along this analysis, because regardless what happens, there is no good outcome for South Africans. There are worse outcomes. There are disastrous outcomes. There are Armageddon outcomes. But, I mean, what we're talking about here, let's just suppose for a moment, I'm not making this claim, but let's suppose for a moment that the PA gets 2 or 3% and the ANC doesn't drop as far as people thought, and they get 46, 47%. There you go. There's your coalition right there. The EFF is not going to go into coalition with the ANC as long as Ramaphosa's there. But Ramaphosa might not be there, depending on how poorly they do.
I don't think he will be there.
Well, if I'll tell you, I've already predicted if they hit 40% and below, he's gone. He's gone.
I think even at 45% or 46%, even 48%, you remember, and again, it's important to listen to the ANC's rhetoric themselves, because the ANC classes an electoral defeat, not them being in government. Like, they can still be in government, right? Because remember, you can even form a government below 50%. It's a minority government, but remember that to form a government, you just need to be the majority party. You just need to be the biggest party.
The plurality.
Now, it doesn't mean that you have to have over 50% of the
just the
electoral
plurality.
support. You just have to be the largest party, right? So the ANC can still form a minority government, just a 45%, on the basis that nobody else could get together a 45% coalition. So if the DA only manages to get, say, a 40% coalition, the ANC gets 45% of the vote, then in theory they don't need to go in coalition with anyone, because they could still form a government, but it would be a minority government, and it'd be very difficult to get anything passed in Parliament because they won't have the numbers, right? Unless they coerce different parties, which they could do. But the reality of the situation is, do not forget that the ANC classes an electoral defeat, not as not being in government, but as not securing 50%. Mm-hmm. So if they do not get 50% of the vote, they consider that to be an electoral defeat. They are not getting 50% of the vote. So there will be an electoral defeat. Now, once that happens, you have to then point your fingers and go, well, who's at fault? And logistically speaking, the first thing that you always argue is, you say, it's the leader, right? And in this instance, the leader is Cyril Ramaphosa. So will he take the loss? Don't know. Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, no, I've talked about this before about minority coalitions. You just need a plurality. You don't have to have a majority, but then getting legislation passed, you still have to have 50 plus 1 to get something passed. So you get paralysis. You get paralysis in Parliament is what you get. And the other reason I told people it's going to be a bumpy ride, because even if a opposition coalition had a plurality or majority and led South Africa's government, you have bureaucracies staffed with patronage hires. some of whom feel great fealty and loyalty to the ANC, so they'll go slow. They won't work. Well, I mean, not like they do now, a lot of them. But, point is that it's going to take years to root out the dead wood and the treasonous conduct of people who are in the bureaucracy, just like Trump dealt with. I mean, our bureaucracy is full of people who undermined the Trump administration and committed federal crimes and got away with it by ignoring the orders of the chief executive, by going slow, by not executing federal policy and federal law. They did that. And the same thing will happen in South Africa regardless. So it's going to be a bumpy ride for a long time. Now, there's a comment here from Charles Van Onselen. I call him the voice of reason, but I think he's listening to a guy, and I don't think he believes this. But, the MK spokesman talking about 2/3 majority. Those people are delusional. 2/3 majority. They're not even going to get 2/3 majority in KZN. And they might wind up being the largest party there if they're lucky. But the implosion of MK in the past 2 weeks.
No one is getting 2/3.
No.
And this idea, look, okay, we'll talk about it in a sec. But just very quickly, there was a super chat here from Nicholas Groves who said he's just opening his second can.
Oh, yeah.
There's he'll see me at Sergeant Pepper's. Like, hello, Nicholas. I know who you are. Obviously, yeah. He says he's inebriated as usual. So enjoy your can, Nicholas. Anyway, thank you for the super chat. Anyway, let's get back to what we were saying. So it's also important to remember something, like you can't go into a election and say something like, well, I'm not going to win. Just remember, everybody goes into a election and they have to say, I'm going to win, even if they know they're not going to win. Don't forget that Black Land First says they're going to get 2/3 of majority. And they don't even get like 5 votes. Yeah, but you can't go into an election if you don't at least have the belief in yourself.
Yeah, I mean, look, John Steenhuisen's telling us, look for the big surprise in KZN. I think the big surprise in KZN is they might go from 15% to 18%.
You know what I mean? So, but you can't go into an election claiming defeat, even though if you know you're not going to win.
Yeah.
You can't go there and say, vote for me, but don't worry, I'm not going to win. It's like voting for the loser. No one does that. Yeah. So you have to go in there and say, I'm going to get 2/3. But you also have to remind yourself, like, MK is a small party. It's an unheard of party, and it's not been tried and tested. People may like Jacob Zuma. He's going to get a percentage of the vote, and it's going to be a sizable amount purely because of Jacob Zuma. But it's not going to be 2/3. No. And the reality is you then have to ask yourself a different question, and that is, if it is 2/3, where's that? Sorry, not 2/3. If it's 10% that they're getting, where's the 10% coming? Because the natural assumption is that they're going to get this magical, say 10%, and it's just going to basically, like, all the numbers are going to stay the same plus 10%. Like, no, that's not how it works. There is a voting pool. The pool will just be redistributed. So whose votes are actually being redistributed? And a lot of people are like, oh, they're worried it will be the opposition, basically. It will be the DAs. It's like, no, it's not. No. Like, these guys don't vote for the DA.
No, they vote for the ANC or IFP. IFP. Yeah, they vote for those two.
Oh,
or EFF.
EFF. So if you look at the moment, MK is absolutely destroying the EFF.
Yeah.
Like, the EFF are...
They've just evaporated. They've evaporated. No one's even talking about them, which is shocking with the big mouth that Malema has.
What's Malema said lately? I don't know. I mean, even his agendas on things like, David Unterhalter and the as a judicial appointment.
That's right. He's on the Judicial Services Commission.
And he said, as long as I'm on the commission, he will never be appointed. That white boy, he just got appointed, right? So Malema's relevance is disappearing, as is the EFF, and that's thanks to the MK party. Mm-hmm. So, at the end of the day, you could be like, okay, they are taking some of the vote, but it's just a redistribution of the vote. Now, the reality is that block, let's call it that far left block, has not been in the 2/3 majority since like 1999, guys. Like, it's that those days are gone.
Yeah, their time is long past.
No one is getting 2/3. But also, please don't underestimate. 10% is still a sizable amount of the vote. Remember, as we said, the EFF has been able to cause the most amount of chatter in this parliament, and they've had the biggest impact in this parliament. Don't forget that if it was not for the EFF, we would have expropriation without compensation, the amendment of the Constitution. It was thanks to the EFF that we didn't have the Constitution amended.
Right, because they didn't disagree with EWC. They just didn't like the way the ANC was doing it. That was their argument.
Their argument was that it wasn't done strong enough.
Right.
Not that it was being done. They were like, no, all land must be nationalized. If you're not doing that, why bother? So, and the ANC were like, nah, we'll just have some custodian of land. Like, and they were like, no, that's not what we want. So that's why they didn't do it. But remember that 10% meant that there wasn't legislative change, and that legislative or constitutional change in this instance. So don't underestimate the power of 10%. It's still sizable.
Yeah, but they did vote for NHI.
No, they didn't actually.
The EFF?
Yeah, the EFF didn't vote for it. They didn't like it because, again, this idea that there would still be public hospitals that could private hospitals that could still be, the government could.
Well, they've been complaining about it now for that. I have to go back and look at the voting record, but I thought they voted for it. But they've definitely been complaining about it now because that's the only time we've heard anything from the EFF in weeks has been that moan.
So actually, none of the parties voted for it apart from like El Jamal and a couple of the smaller minnow parties. But the EFF didn't vote for it. But the ANC still managed to get it through because they have the majority.
Not even the provincial legislators, they didn't vote for it.
I don't know about the provincial, but
whatever the case is, it doesn't matter. It's a fait accompli at the moment, and my goodness. Well, thank you, Discovery, for being greedy bastards, saddling South Africa with the mess they've got now. But look, I mean, we're just days away. Let me ask you this question. I mean, because, you guys over at Morning Shot and Retardistan are kind of cynical. And I've been accused of being cynical on more than one occasion. But, I mean, a lot of people are holding out this is some great election. A lot of the deck chairs are going to be moved around. I think deck chairs are going to be moved, but the needle, as I've said, it's going to be bumpy, regardless of what happens. And if the ANC remains in power, the decline will just continue. What are your thoughts as we get within 5 days away from the election now, or 6 days?
I really don't think it makes a difference, to be honest. I don't think, we as you know, we know everyone. We talk to everybody. The biggest difficulty that you have in South Africa at the moment is it's very difficult to fix certain issues quickly. Like the issue you've got, let's say PRASA. Mate, that's not a quick fix. Like if you've traveled around this country, I've traveled around this country. The railway lines are still there, but like there's a lot of bush and trees and shrubs that have grown over them. You couldn't send a train down it. Like you'd have to do significant maintenance.
Well, it depends on where you're at. If you go to northwest, I can show you where the rails have been stolen. not just the bushes growing.
So that's exactly what I was going to say. So like in the Eastern Cape, you find that the tracks are still there, but there's bush all over them. You couldn't put a track down them. Sometimes there's even like, I've actually seen. So where I live in the Eastern Cape, they've recently retarred the road, and there was like old lines over them, and they just tarred over the lines, man. So like,
there's no lines painted.
So they've just tarred straight over the railway line. Like it's still there.
Oh, railway lines. Oh, I thought you were talking about the lines painted on the road.
No. So I'm saying the railway lines. They just tarred over it. Jeez. So like, okay, of course, there's no train going over there, but you can never put one down at a game without doing significant work. Now, that type of work, and if you go to any of the railway stations around the country, like they're all fucking screwed, man. They've been looted and homeless shelters now and drug dens and So to fix something, and we're using trains as an example, to fix that in a couple of years, that's not possible.
Not going to happen.
The ports are the same. The last big port to be created in South Africa was actually Richards Bay, was the harbor of Richards Bay. I should know, my grandfather actually built it. I still have the drawings in my house for Richards Bay. I've got the architectural plans. But that was the last big kind of thing, and that was done in the apartheid era.
Yeah, largest coal terminal in the world, which is largely unused at this moment.
Yeah, and so if you look at like the port of Port Elizabeth, we've got two ports here. It was supposed to have been expanded ages ago. We've got two cranes here. One of them don't work. We got a spare crane sent here to help offload things. The spare crane that was sent here was sent from Durban. That crane's broken. Like a lot of the cargo gets redirected into Cape Town. Cape Town's infrastructure can't cope with the actual influx of the lorries going in and out. So you've got a big, long, massive, huge tailback of lorries just for the turnaround. The only way to fix that is create more ports. Well, you don't create a port overnight. That's like a 5 to 10 year project, and that's even if it's well governed, which it won't be. So then you go onto power. Now, arguably, power is actually the one thing we are actually doing fairly well at the moment. And I know that comes as a surprise, but we've had quite a while now of no load shedding, and all of the information coming out of ESCOM is that load shedding is probably going to be reduced even after the election, because the ANC are now doing something that they're not supposed to do, but they've gone, fuck it, we're doing it anyway. And that is all of the coal-powered turbines that they were supposed to have decommissioned, they're just using.
Yeah.
So a lot of their CO2 green targets they're not meeting, and they're just going, sod it, they're just burning coal, and they're going, we'll deal with that later, because they know that no electricity is an electoral defeat for them, as opposed to just getting moaned at for burning too much coal and losing a couple of subsidies from the EU that they don't really need anyway. So that that's possible that will continue now after the elections. So if that does happen, there will be economic growth just on the basis of shit on me.
The fact that there's electricity, people can actually keep things refrigerated and actually do transactions. That would be a nice change of pace.
So it's that in itself. It's very interesting that they're saying now, because of these two, I think we're nearly onto 2 months now with electricity. We've had nearly 2% economic growth just because we had electricity, nothing else, just electricity. So South Africa has a shitload of potential, but it can't be done quickly. And if you understand that, then you also have to ask yourself the question: if you were in 2024 knowing that there's all these challenges that you had to take on, none of them can be fixed quickly, would you want to do it? Knowing that, remember, your life in politics is usually 4 to 5 years. It's an electoral cycle, right? So would you really want to be sticking around 4 to 5 years and being like the worst guy in the country and the guy responsible for things that you can't really fix? I think your answer would be no. So arguably, even people like, and we said it to John, like, who the fuck would want to take over this place and run it like for the next 5 years? Like, what a shit job. I wouldn't want that.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'm dealing with a similar situation with a veterans organization that's a complete disaster because of criminality, officer misconduct, nonsense going on, and dealing with local townies. And it's a thankless task. And if I don't do it, the place closes. It's been there for 78 years. But quite frankly, it's pushing me to the point where I've had enough. There's just too many people undermining the place. Someone filed a grievance this week with the Liquor Control Board, and they're the people that have say over whether we operate or not. And their grievance, based on the liquor control people coming by, proved to be unfounded. They're making a claim about some gambling game we don't even have right now. We're not even running these games because our license wasn't renewed. We're going through this big rigmarole because with the state and the IRS to get the license renewed. So we're not even doing gambling. It's not even there. And someone made a complaint about it, and on the basis of that, they come in and harass us, and they want documentation from our sales and from this and from that and all our bills. It's enough. It's the same with the government. Why would you want to do it? People asked me before, when I ran, my view of the audience in particular is like, well, Chris, if you win the election, you're not going to broadcast anymore? And what's going to happen? I said, well, if I win the election, then I will talk to the ethics department at the legislature, and as long as there's no conflict, I'll continue to do it. The only reason there'd be a conflict, it probably is because this channel's monetized, but maybe I just demonetize. I said, but I'll still do broadcast. It'd just be a different schedule. And I said, but come April 23rd, win or lose, I mean, I'm not losing any sleep. April 23rd, I don't win on the primary, then I don't spend any more money. I don't waste my time knocking on doors, meeting people who won't vote for me. And then if I do win, then I'll move on. But, frankly, it's if I win, it's like the dog catching the back of the bakkie, and biting down and holding on. What do you do now? I mean, it's a whirlwind mess, and this state is in such a bad shape right now. It's just crazy. And like South Africa, Pennsylvania has a wealth of resources. They've just discovered that all the fracking we've been doing, that if they take the tailings from the fracking and the stuff they pump down the ground, and the stuff comes back up as a consequence of it when they get the gas out, that Pennsylvania alone could provide, by refining that, and there's a process that already exists to take 90% of the lithium out of that waste product, we would produce 40% of the nation's demand for lithium. This one state. We're already huge in coal, oil, and gas. But the problem is it's run by lunatics, and that's the problem. So once you catch the bumper, what are you going to do? Yeah, it's not worth it. But anyway, All right. Well, we are 6 days away from the election. You are nonplussed about the election, and I think that's a fair reaction. But
I don't think it's the tail of all election that's a lot of people are hoping it to be, because to be honest, I don't think. Ramon likes to say we're not at the bottom yet, therefore we can't really creep our way back up. And a lot of people will look at that and be like, well, okay, this doesn't make much sense. What does he actually mean by that? And the honest opinion of why he says that, if you understand what he means, is that it's very difficult to claw your way up when things are half broken but half fixed, because things are either going to break or they're going to get fixed, but it's not so easy to fix them. Whereas when you start off at the bottom and then you just fix upwards, it becomes a lot clearer for you to see what's happening. Because remember, when things are half broken, you've got to maintain and then fix, and it's a very difficult juggling act. That's why we've had so much load shedding this year, right? Because the ANC are like, well, it's not quite broken, but we've got to fix it, so we've got to turn it off. But then that causes load shedding, which people don't like. So do we turn it off, or do we fix it, or do we just let it break? But when things are just broken, you just turn them off and fix them, right? So it makes the options clearer to manage. And at the moment, South Africa isn't broken enough just to get to a point where everybody becomes super practical and just fixes it. So, it's possible that the next 4 years or the next 5 years may get to that state. I don't know. But Charles says, we can only hope the change will be effective in 5 years. And what I would say is, if you cast your mind back to 5 years ago now, Donald Trump was in the White House. We had, the world peace. There were no new wars being entered into. Gas was as cheap as it had ever been in the US. There was, record rates of employment. Life seemed like the good old days. Remember pre the scamdemic days where you were locked in your house for a year, and so just think to yourself in that time. You've had Russia, you've had the whole war now in Israel. We've had the news media is talking about scamdemics and WHO pandemic treaties, and this was pre St. George Floyd, and the whole Black Lives Matter bullshit, and mostly peaceful protests, and remember the protests of 2021 in Durban, all of that's been in the last 5 years, man. Just the invasion of the Europe and America and the southern border, and all the crazy bloody reparation bullshit that's going everywhere, and the diversity and the tranny rights, and that's all in the last 5 years, man. So when you talk about change in 5 years as if it's a small thing, mate, 5 years in politics is a fucking long time.
It's a lifetime.
A lot can happen.
It's a lifetime. It's a generation of politics.
And when you're talking 10 years in politics, my God, you're talking an eternity. And so it's, for those of you who don't know me, I do not like politics. I am not a politician. I am a monarchist. Because you see, monarchists, they will look at their country on a lifelong view. Politicians only look at it for the short-term gains. You're talking 4 or 5 years and they're out. So they don't really give a shit what the long-term view is. But monarchs do, because they have to live there and pass it on to their successors, right? So they've got more skin in the game. In my opinion, yeah, you might not like it, but I don't care. But at the end of the day, the changes that South Africa will see in the next 5 years will be significant. The changes South Africa will see in the next 10 years, none of us can even imagine. So enjoy the ride, but life will not be the same in 10 years, regardless of how you look at it.
Well, most of us can't imagine it, but there will be certain people that do predict and imagine it. Most things have been predicted. People just ignored those predictions over the past 30 years, but only a handful of people. And maybe that's why I'm not going to be successful in politics and why I've avoided it, because I don't look at tomorrow. I look at 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road. And things that I planned and executed in Africa 10, 15, 20 years ago are being executed and successfully achieved today in places like Botswana and Liberia and other places. And that's just kind of looked at. In fact, I made a plan in 1984 when I was a private on what my career path was going to be and what I intended to do. And because I made that career path and I stuck to it and it was what I wanted to achieve, I passed up great opportunities like working in Silicon Valley in 1995 time frame when the internet was taking off. Could have been incredibly wealthy doing that, and also turned down, an opportunity to work on Wall Street at the Union Bank of Switzerland, which would have been huge later on when I was a senior officer, because I had a plan. But I came up with a plan and I focused on it and I executed over the course of 3 decades plus, and it panned out exactly the way I intended, with the exception of one thing. And by the way, it wasn't an easy plan. It wasn't like I said, I'm going to be a petrol station owner or I'm going to start a business. It wasn't that. I'm not that those are easy, but I mean, becoming a full colonel in the U.S. Army, which is less than 1% of the officers who come in during a particular year over a period of time, and doing all the things I did. The only thing I didn't achieve was being the defense attaché in South Africa, but that was beyond my control. We had it in the Army. They gave it to the Air Force or the Navy as I became a colonel, and so I could no longer do it. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. And you're right. Politicians, they look at today, they look at the next election, and that's what their focus is. And that's why most politicians are in it for craving political power, self-enrichment, or self-aggrandizement. And that's what's so nasty about politics. Anyway, Byron, any final thoughts, and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, just last comments I'm going to make is just obviously there's a couple comments down the section. A couple of people.
You can address those, yeah.
Chris says it. This is I won't be in South Africa in that amount of time. Look, I want to highlight it, and it's something I say on every live stream. I will say it again and again and again, and that is you need to remember that at the end of the day, we are talking about the shit show that is South Africa, because I'm a South African podcaster. I talk in South Africa. I review South African news, right? But you must remind yourself that South Africa is retarded. Understand, it is retarded in terms of things that it does. But if you were listening to retarded nonsense coming out of the US or Britain or Australia or New Zealand or Canada, you'd be nodding along going, God, this stuff's retarded too. I wouldn't want to be here either. A large part of it is like the Brits want to immigrate and leave Britain. There's a sizable amount of people that leave Australia that are Australians that go to other countries. It's like every country has its problems, and to assume that South Africa's problems are unique to it, it's bullshit. It's not. If you're going to turn around and go, yeah, but the racism, New York recently did a whole BE program just to enrich, previously disadvantages people there. I mean, come on, man, this is a worldwide phenomenon. To assume that South Africa is unique, it's not. The whole world is becoming the third world. That's laugh. The difference is it is our country. I'm not intending to chuck in the towel and say, oh, screw my country. Like every country, as Charles says, has their own unique problems. So don't be disheartened. Like, yeah, South Africa has its problems, but so does everywhere else. That's laugh. Like, at the end of the day, yeah, it's shit, but that's everywhere shit, mate. That's like you just got to smell your flavor of shit. You want dog shit or horse shit, but you're still getting shit.
Yeah, and South Africa is not unique in that perspective. You're spot on. Maybe 10 years or 5 years ago, we might have had a lot of this nonsense. But the only difference in South Africa is it got there first. Fees must fall, freebies, handouts, they got there first. Special privileges for special classes of people. South Africa got there first. So I guess that's one notch in the belt. They got there first. Anyway, all right. Well, Byron, thanks for the short notice decision to go with me with the Braai Brus. I think a lot of people enjoyed our conversation today, as usual. Not sure when we'll do the next one. The people don't know. I'll announce it now. I'll do the news after this. My passport did come in finally, and the old one has been canceled. There's the little punch holes in it right there. And so I've got my new passport, which is completely different, and I've already booked my flight to South Africa. I will be arriving Tuesday in South Africa, and I'll be in the Western Cape initially because the time is too short to be anywhere else for the election. So I'll see folks in South Africa starting next week. I'll be there for about 4 weeks, and I intend to be in the Western Cape, in Gauteng, probably in Eastern Cape, Port Elizabeth area, and I have to figure out my schedule for the rest of it. There's unfortunately no rugby for me to watch, it looks like, because Curry Cup isn't happening, so I will have to adjust my schedule for speaking engagements and other things. But there you have it. So with any good fortune, I'll make it a PE, and then Byron and I can link up and maybe do another live stream together like we did in the past.
Well, safe flights, and I wish you luck on your travels. make sure you're not flying over Russia or anything. You know what I mean? Like you are an ex-army colonel, and they might just think to themselves, "That's spy" or something. You never know.
No, there's no chance I'm going over Russia. No matter how lost a pilot could get, we couldn't possibly wind up there. We will be flying over the South Atlantic, though. Anyway. All right, Byron, thanks a lot. Have a good weekend. Appreciate it, and be safe out there.
Cheers, man. Take it easy.
All right, folks. Byron Shepherd, my co-host for Braai Brus. I hope you found that interesting. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. It'll be less than a minute break. I just got to go to take care of some business. About a minute later, you're going to be automatically redirected to the news. I'll cover the news for today. And thank you for your patience. I do appreciate it. And we'll see you here in just a couple moments on Chris Wyatt Reports. So thanks a lot. Do appreciate it. All right, folks. Just a moment away.